a software craftsperson here at Codurance, and I'll be facilitating today's event. This is the fifth one, I think, in the series of events about technical coaching. So the topics to be that we will cover today are, well, there are so many topics to cover, which are the ones that we need to address when giving technical coaching, and which ones are the most important so we can have a return of investment as fast as possible. Today's session will be led by José Rodríguez, José Huerta, I'm sorry.
José Rodríguez as well. So no
because
problem.
it says here José Rodríguez, and I just went with that. So he's our managing director at Codurance and also a technical coach. And well, if you have any questions, any thoughts, just share them in the chat. And José will explain how he likes the session to be. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Rita, and thanks everyone for being here. As Rita said, this is not your typical talk. Like, I don't have slide deck, I don't have any of that, right? I have a bunch of content and things that I find interesting about this topic, and I would like to share some of the learning, some of the structure, and some of the things that we use at Codurance to do this. But again, it's a very community-like session, right? Like, the idea here is for everyone to learn from everyone. So if you have questions or if you have experiences that you want to share that you think will be helpful to the topics that we're discussing, please feel free to, put it on the chat or open up your mic, and it's no problem. Yeah? Like, it's really a conversation. Yeah, we're all learning together on this. Yeah. And for today's topic, as Rita very well explained, right, is the idea is there are so many things that you could focus on. How do you pick what you focus on, and how do you make sure that whatever you picked, will get you the results as soon as possible? Yeah, that ROI that business likes to talk so much about. Yeah, we've done already a couple of sessions on other topics. I'll be making some reference to some of the things that I mentioned before. I'm not going to explain them in detail because there are sessions already explaining them in detail. So if there's something that you don't understand, just tell me. I'm happy to refresh a little bit, but if not, check out the other sessions or whatever, and you'll be able to get the content really easy. It's also in the YouTube channel where this one is going to be published. Yeah. So today's topic, too much to learn, too little time. In the first session that I did, where I went and did an overview of everything that I was going to cover, we talked about some topics that you could go into, like content, right? From business, product, technical leadership, software design, architecture, like all of these things. There's a whole body of knowledge on a lot of this stuff, right? So there's a lot to, that you can dig into, lots of books, lots of things that you can try. But when you are doing technical coaching, you normally want to strike a balance, right? Like, you're there to help a team perform better, right? You're there to help them fix some of the problems that they're finding themselves. So how do you pick what is important to teach, or how much of it to teach, and so on and so forth? Yeah. And that's going to be the topic for today. Yeah. Let's start with a question. Like, when you think of ROI, for technical coaching, what do you think about? Like, what do you think is that ROI? ROI is return on investment. Yeah, for those that may not be familiar. Again, I said this is interactive, so I'm expecting it's not a rhetorical question. Come on, what do you think? Time of crafting new features. Okay, so maybe reducing the time of that it takes you to put new features out. Yeah, so that could be a return on investment. Okay, anything else? That's it. right, of technical coaching, the dev team becomes self-organized and self-directed. Okay. So some things around self-organization and self-direction could be a return on investment, depending on where that direction is going. No, it could be a good thing that the business wants as well, right? Anything else? No. Money, happiness. No, the ratio between money and happiness. Okay. Now we're going into it, because ROI is a financial term, right? It's actually a formula to calculate ROI. Yeah, return, yeah, minus the investment that you make over the investment, right? And that gives you a percentage of how much you got. Yeah, this is a simple example, but except for maybe the last person or penultimate person, program and stakeholder customers. Okay, so let's do something like the questions, Rita, if you can monitor them, and if you see that they come to just be the speaker for them, because otherwise I'm always having to look at the chat. Okay. Cool. So again, from the perspective of the business, or the traditional perspective of ROI, yeah, it's also about money. Yeah. And things like lead time and so on, we can actually quantify, right? We can say that, if we shorten our lead time to half, yeah, the time that takes to, from idea to having in the hands of, and we reduce that to half, that means we could do more, right? Like if we have this, then we can do double of what we want, no? And that is in itself quantifiable as well, right? You can put a symbol on it, like a money symbol on it, okay? However, when we think about technical coaching, and people are, okay, so let's invest in bringing in a technical coach, or let's have the team lead, or someone volunteers to do some, let's teach TDD, whatever it is that you try to do. The expectation is usually a bit different, no? Like when people are doing this, yeah, usually what they expect, is something like the dotted line here, right? Like we start doing 10-year coaching, and then suddenly goes up, whatever, performance, etc., right? Like we get results really fast, yeah. But the reality is a bit different, right? We know that as soon as we start in business, the change doesn't happen from one day to the next, right? So usually you need to invest a bit before you start getting some of the results. And in some cases, the performance may go down. In fact, in most cases, the performance will go down. Yeah. By how much, it will depend. No, but it's usually, there is a lower performance when you are trying to accept the change. Correct? Okay. However, this is still the prevalent idea, right? Like if I bring in a technical coach, suddenly things will just go up, right? And this is a problem that we usually have to deal with, when we're trying to do this. So we need to find a balance, yeah, between those results, yeah, and the investment that we are making, and how that affects, let's say, the productivity of the team and so on. Because things like upskilling and delivery are kind of pulling in different directions. There are different objectives, right? Like most of the time, in order to upskill, you need to reduce the productivity, right? Because people are learning. It doesn't mean that once they get the skill and they are proficient, they may be able to produce more, or they may be able to do the work faster or better or whatever, right? But initially you're going to have to slow down, right? And this is an issue. So the way to deal with that is to find ways in which you can get results as soon as possible, so that there is evidence that it's working, and you don't have to wait for a long time or do a leap of faith, in order to believe it, or to basically for the business to some extent to think that they're getting the return that they want. Yeah, is that clear? Yeah, cool. So you need to find that balance, So what normally gets in the way of ROI, of getting that return on investment? Are any other people here have tried to do technical coaching before? You're either professional on it, so meaning you get paid for it, or you're doing it on your team, or you maybe helping someone. No, it doesn't have to be a professional thing. How many of you are familiar with this activity? Let's put it like that. No?
No.
No? Okay. I'm guessing that if you're here, you're kind of interested in it and would like to,
Yeah.
right?
I know a little, but the concept, not the practice, no?
Okay. So that's the idea, no? Like we're here to kind of, so this is something that you will find. If you do it professionally or you do it internally, at some point people are going to say like, okay, but why are we dedicating, 2 hours to do this mob programming session? We could be putting features out, and et cetera, right? That kind of stuff. But normally what gets in the way of that ROI? Yeah. Can you think of things that, prevent you from getting that ROI? Have you received any technical coaching before? Have you worked with a technical coach before? Yeah. What were the things that, stood in the way of that?
Sometimes the lack of knowledge of the current level of the team, the current state, the flat line at the start of the chart.
Okay.
You need to know that very well in order to get faster results.
Okay. Okay. So understanding where the team is and the gap between what they need to perform and so on. I'm not going to go into too much detail because that's the second session that I did was on establishing goals and baselines, which talks precisely about, where is the team at the moment, and what's the gap. But yeah, if the gap is too big, you're going to take longer in order to, but talking about what we're talking about, which is ROI, you can still get some ROI even if you're not at the level where you expect to end in. Yeah. So usually there's a few things that get in the way. Yeah. One of them is fear, the fear of change. I don't know if you see
the mindset. Yeah.
the mindset. Well, laziness. Someone says laziness. Also, business deadlines versus team needs to learn something. Yeah. So this is the first thing that I already mentioned. That balance between the delivery and the upskilling, that is usually something that gets in the way. So you need to balance that out, and we will talk a little bit about how to do that. So that two objectives that are kind of competing with each other is one thing. Another thing is the fear of the change itself. Yeah. So basically, are you coming and telling me that, I've been doing things wrong because I don't do TDD? No. Now I need to write more code when, I could just write the code once, and now I need to maintain the tests as well. No. And so on and so forth, right? Like if I start doing this and anyone can work here, then I am not that indispensable anymore. Like all of these things are kind of there, right? And they form part of dealing with any change. And in technical coaching, you are introducing a change. You are trying to change a system, in this case the way that the team works or the organization works and so on, right? So that is one aspect that needs to be addressed. And there is usually, this is quite studied, right? So there are two models that I like because they help us think about how to do this, right? One of them is the Virginia Satir's change curve. I don't know if you've seen this before, the J curve, some people call it, and so on, right? Which is kind of the stages that people go through as they're having to deal with some inciting event, like, I don't know, in this case, she used to be a psychotherapist, right? A family therapist and all that stuff. So a lot of that can be translated into the workplace as well, because it's about dealing with change and how people react to that. And depending on where people are in that change, they need certain things. They need more support, or they need more clarity, or they need, and it's you as a technical coach are having to understand where people are going through in that change and understand what it is that they need so that you can provide that. So that's one aspect on how to deal with that. The other aspect is a separate, different model. Yeah, similar, also coming from therapy and so on, is, you know, the valley of despair, right? Like you go through this thing, and then at the beginning there's a lot of optimism, right? You've probably seen this model before, because it's also adapted from psychology. The whole denial, anger, bargain, you know, how people deal with grief. Yeah. So this is kind of like, again, adapting to a situation. So this can be also adapted to the workplace. And, you know, you start with high expectations. No, yeah, we're gonna do TDD. Oh shit, this is harder than we thought. No, oops, I'm not that productive anymore, etc., etc. Oh my god, what are we gonna do? We're never gonna come out of this. And then at some point, something makes, you know, click, and then you start getting, oh look, it's not that, it gets easier, and then you know, overcome that thing. So understanding that people are gonna, you know, be afraid to some extent, or we're going to have resistance on the change, and where and how that journey looks like, is a good way as well to kind of mitigate some of the problems that this brings. Okay, so moving on. Yeah, another common thing, or common sources, are, you know, the code itself. Yeah, things like the complexity that the code has, the legibility of the code, the testing strategy, whether it has tests or not, or or how things are being tested. Yeah, things like architectural decisions that have already been made that are kind of difficult to, you know, to work around. No, and so on and so forth. Right. So that's one area. Do you agree with that? That tends to be an obstacle in getting the ROI. By the way, this conversation, is yeah. We for sure,
think,
especially in
well,
legacy. Yeah, yeah.
I think you have to find, no, the early adopter, no, like person who buy an iPhone, no, the early adopter for demonstration that the product is good, or the change is good, and the other persons imitate this. No?
That's a very good point, because again, part of getting that ROI and enabling the change has to do with showing the results. But there are some people that take more effort, no, than others, yeah, no, to jump on the wagon of the change that you want to make, right? So all of those, that's quite important as well, like selecting who you're going to be focused on, or that kind of stuff, right? But in this case, I'm not looking at the personal kind of aspect on how to move it forward. I'm looking more at the you know, common sources that get in the way of you being able to get that result. And you're right, people are part of that, like selecting the right people, or having the right cooperation, no, in that sense. But again, I include that inside the fear aspect, right? Okay, like some people will not be afraid, some people will be more lenient, right? I'll go back and change some of that stuff as well. Yeah. Another common problem is communication. Yeah. Yeah. Either the domain clarity, you know, some people call things one way, other people call it a different way, business another way, you know. Knowledge silos. Yeah. So knowledge is, there's certain people who have the knowledge and other people don't have the knowledge, and then you end up having dependencies with those people. So if those people don't change, or don't start acting in the way that you're trying to, then, you know, things just get, you can use pair
programming for divide the.
That is one of the things that you can do. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. Okay. Yeah. The complexity of the domain. So you could be, you know, in a financial institution, or in a, you know, travel agency or whatever, and they tend to be quite complex domain. This is not just, oh, you have some availabilities in a room and that's it, right? Like there's usually a lot that happens behind the curtain in order for that to work. And yeah, lack of historical context as well. So some decisions have been made, but we don't, you know, and we have the results in front of us, but we don't understand why those decisions were made. We don't have any record of that happening, or why, and so on. So that gets in the way. You don't understand the history, therefore, you know, you tend to make the same mistakes over and over again, right? And of course, there's also language and cultural differences, right? It's not the same if you're working with a team, some are in India, some are in Poland, so no. So domain can change all the time and stuff. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the communication aspect, I kind of group them together. There's probably more, but there's a lot about, you know, how we talk to each other and understand the concepts of what we're trying to change or to get the return on. Yeah. Then there's an organizational aspect as well. And I separated this into two aspects. One is organizational culture, or organizational structure, and cultural alignment, or the culture of the organization. Yeah. Structure for me is stuff like, you know, governance, you know, if you have a committee that signs off on going to production, no, or in the case of topology, like whether your team has everything it needs in order to put stuff into production, or, you know, it passes it on to another team and then to another team and then to another team, right? Or it has the knowledge that it requires. So how the teams are aligned to the value creation structure tends to be another organizational structural problem, no? Things like
Jose,
yeah.
sorry, Germán has a very nice comment. He wonders if an ideal company exists. He says, I still have to experience a place where the organization focus on the team learning instead of the deadlines. And usually what happens is that deadlines eat any training strategy. So it fits into the organization structures thing.
I don't know if ideal. No, it's always, you know, there's always things that are competing for that time or that capacity and stuff. I think it's a matter of planning ahead, no, and having consistency. For instance, when we do our financial planning, we don't account for everyone's time to be fully billable, right? Like we already say, okay, instead of having, I don't know, 80% billable time people, we're going to have 67%. Now, some people may say, oh, that's horrible, like 67%, like you're not making any money or whatever. Well, it's time that is being invested, no, in people getting better, etc., etc. So if you already plan with that in mind, then it doesn't become a problem, because, you know, whatever target you're trying to achieve is already taking into consideration that you're going to be using that time for other things, right? But you need certain consistency with that, and you need certain integrity, no, or the ability to kind of okay, let's stick to this, no, let's really respect, which is not usually the case when you don't have an organizational support, right? And people need to fight against that. Yeah.
Well, it's argued that companies are not schools or training institutions.
I agree. I mean, yes and no.
Like the
their purpose is not to train people and some, because they, as you said, they're not schools, they're not universities or whatever, but any good organization is also a training organization, because in order to scale and in order to provide great service and all of these things, you do need to train people, and you do need people to be their best, no? And if you don't put that in place, you can't have consistency, right? And that's part of the thing. Yeah, no, we agree. But again, it doesn't get in the way of work itself if you're already planning that you're going to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's when you don't plan and you think that you're gonna, you know, you focus on getting some results, but not taking into consideration how you're gonna get to those results. That's when a lot of the time you have clashes. Yeah. Another area that creates clash is things like reward systems and things like this, no, like, or let's say recruitment, this kind of stuff, right? Like the organizational systems that are in place in order to maintain the status quo, but you're trying to introduce a change, and you're not changing those systems, right? Therefore, let's say you want people to use TDD, but you don't look for TDD in your hiring or in testing or whatever, right? Therefore, you know, some of the people that are internally are doing that change, and now they're using TDD. But when new people come in, because they don't know how to do it differently, no, they're going to continue doing something else, so they're going to continue perpetuating the previous behavior. So those things also get in the way of what you want, no? And you may start coaching a team, and then people leave, and some new people join, etc. And then you have to start all over again, so to speak, because it's not being taken care of at other areas. Yeah. The same for individual bonuses and things like this, right? Like lines of code coverage. Like I'm saying individual bonuses doesn't need to be money, but it's kind of like reward systems. What it is that you reward, no, in the organization or in the team. Yeah. And of course, location is also quite important. I mentioned distributed teams for people in Poland, Romania, or whatever. I don't know if you heard of the Allen curve before. No, this is a study from the 70s, and basically what it says is it looked at the relationship between people's communication and how far apart they were, right? So one of the things that came out of this is was that someone who is 40 meters away compared to someone that is 6 meters away, you communicate with the 6 meters away 4 times more than you communicate with the other one. And when you're in a different floor, for instance, is one of the other findings, like if you're in a different floor, you basically don't communicate. Barely communicate, right? And again, this is an old study, yeah, but it's been repeated recently. And it still holds even in the age of remote work and all of these things, and email and Slack and all the things. It still holds because basically you tend to communicate more with the people that you have close, like using email and Slack and etc. Right? So the principles are still there, and it is a problem that can get in the way. If people don't talk to each other, that could be an issue for what you're trying to do. Yeah. Then you have cultural alignment or misalignment. And here I wanted to share with you, we all, before someone was saying this, I think it was Prem, no? Delivery dates, so cheap at all cost, right? Doesn't matter what we need to do in order to, right? That's a cultural thing. Yeah. And in order to illustrate this, I would like to introduce something called the competing values framework, which is basically a matrix, let's put it like that, no? Where you have on one of the axes, you have flexibility and control. On the other one, you have external focus and internal focus. And this allows you to look at projects, behaviors, etc., no, with a different perspective, right? So someone in business who's focused on shipping at all costs, yeah, has a very external focus, probably a very controlled aspect to it, and not so much on the flexibility, not so much on the internal focus and so on, right? However, someone who's looking at, I don't know, refactoring all the time, yeah, is more focused on the internal perspective, right? And on the flexibility perspective than on the rest, no? So depending on where or what kind of shape your culture has, yeah, you're gonna get clashes, right? Because things that are next to each other, things like internal and flexible and external and flexible, they kind of mix together, but opposing quadrants in this thing, they tend to clash. Yeah. So that's another important factor there that you normally see. And again, this takes the shape of many things, no? Like if if operations is focused on process and stability, and is focused on control and internal perspective, not creating problems for us, right? And if someone is trying to put things in the hands of the customer, they're focused externally, no? And they may not have so much on the process side. They just want to keep it out, try it, no? Guessing, something like a startup or something like that. So all of these things will clash if you don't understand what is happening and you're not able to kind of bridge the gap with that. Yeah. And the last group that I wanted to share is more on the process and tools thing, like having outdated tools, etc. frameworks, all this stuff can get in the way of what you want to do. And having processes or methods that are not fit for purpose can also get in the way of what you're trying to do. Yeah. One example is, typical, if you are in a highly compliant environment, a lot of the time people will say, no, we cannot do this here. What do you mean we can't do this here? No, yes, because there needs to be, someone needs to sign off on this thing. Okay, someone needs to sign off on this thing. Let's look at what the compliance thing says that needs to happen, right? Because this is the process. This is what you created out of that document. No, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what needs to happen. The document doesn't say, oh, someone needs to sign. The document usually says something along the lines of there needs to be some kind of verification of, what went out into production, or they need to, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't force you into a specific way of doing it. And then once you understand that, you can work around those things in order to create what you need, right? You can change that process to get to where you want to go. Yeah. So questions here. Is it clear what some of the most common sources are? Yeah. Nope. I've been talking for a very long time. No questions. Okay. So then, how do you get the most ROI? Yeah. Well, first is you need to identify what are the issues, right? And there are many ways. I'm only listing a few here, but again, it links to metrics. It links to other sessions that I already gave. No, but you have tools like SonarQube or Sneak or whatever that can pinpoint to specifically where some things are not working or creating problems. Yeah. You can of course have the talk to the team. What is it that is hurting us the most? Like, what do we spend the most time? The number of what the fuck per minute, or WTFs per minute. I think we're gonna have to edit that to put it on YouTube. But anyways, the number of WTFs per minute, like what is causing that? Usually people have some idea. Finding hotspots in the code, things like what parts of the application are slower or generate more bugs or whatever, things like this. Monitoring trends, open versus closed tickets, lead time, mean time to restore, chain failure rate, like all of these metrics, and the tendency that you have. Decreased morale is another aspect, because again, some of the times we only focus on the most quantifiable stuff, or this type of metric, but also how the team is feeling is important. And another thing that you could do is create kind of like a value stream mapping exercise, right? You look at your process from beginning to end. Yeah, who takes care of what is, and usually just by displaying that, just by showing what happens here, and then what happens here, and then what happens here, and then you can start seeing where the inefficiencies are, right? And that tells you, where are some of the holes, right? So that's important. However, before you do that, yeah, or let's say after you do that, you then come up with the problem of, okay, what is value, right? Like we were talking about ROI, and someone was mentioning, happiness, or whatever. Like that really depends on your perception of what value is. So the next step is, define what is value, yeah, for everyone, including the business and so on, yeah. And then based on that, you can go and you register the value, you articulate that business value to have the conversations that you need to have, for instance, cost of delay, man hours, whatever, productivity, whatever you want to use for that, no? And then you can start having that conversation about allocating time to do the thing that you need to do, because you're no longer talking about, oh, I want to do this refactoring. What you're talking about is, adding this feature will take less time, or we will reduce the number of bugs that we have in this area of the system. Therefore, less time spent fixing things, more time building new features, less time resolving fires, stability of the system, etc., etc. So the minute that you start talking about those things and have the same perspective of value, then it becomes easier to say, we're going to dedicate X amount of time. Yeah.
Herman mentions that there are a lot of things to keep in mind.
Exactly.
It can see why it is so difficult to reach excellence in a company.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that we tend to pass out on, or miss out on, is one, breaking it down, right? So for instance, you're thinking of a refactor and you're thinking on the end result of how you think the system should look, and not so much on what it is the next step, that will get me in that direction and will already give me some value without going all the way to the end, right? So breaking it down into bite-size increments, for what you're doing, for instance, is a good way of doing that. The same if you're trying to teach TDD. You don't go all the way to, let's have 100% coverage, let's have BDD with executable specifications, let's do, you don't go all the way to the maximum that you can do the practice at, or the practices at. You first say, okay, so where are we? We don't have any tests. Okay, maybe we should have some tests. What tests are we going to have? Well, let's do some black box or, kind of golden masters thing. That means we don't need to touch the code, etc. We just look at the output for certain inputs. We fix that. And then if we make a change and that breaks, then we know that it broke, even though the code is not testable, blah, 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 etc. Right? And then the next step would be, this area of the system. And also, you don't have to cover the whole system. Maybe you just cover the part that, you're working with. And then the next time you cover the next part and so on, right? So that breaking it down into small increments that deliver value is essential. It's key for this. And the second part is often overlooked is having a clear definition of when will it be done, right? And this is why we have forever refactors, right? Because people start and they don't know when it ends, right? So if you break it down and you put clear expectations on when things will be finished, then you can focus on that, and by the way, I'm talking about refactoring a lot, right? But this is not just about refactoring. It's the same for applying any practice, right? Like TDD or whatever area you want to. You don't go all the way. You just figure out what are the small chunks that will get you there and clarify when it will be done, and then you go and execute. Then you need to prioritize. Because you will probably come up with a huge backlog of things, value, etc. But you need to prioritize. This is just one example of how you could prioritize that. Some people use formulas, some people use whatever, right? Just decide what you would like, where you would like to start, low effort or urgency or whatever it is, whatever criteria that you're using. But make sure that you kind of create enough of an impact that will allow you to get motivated or get other people motivated in order to do this, right? And work on it. Okay,
this part is from the product owner, no?
Because in the end, a lot of this stuff, again, it's work that you're doing. This is the thing that you're talking about, value for the business as well, right? So that needs to be prioritized in the backlog. It needs to be there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in there, right? If you have a separate backlog for your technical coaching stuff, and then you're always going to have clashes, right? For me, that's an indication. It's a bit of a smell that, again, we're not talking about the same value here, right? Because if we were, it would be in the same list, right? And we can prioritize everything together. In fact, in some cases, it may be that you introduce, if you're doing a refactoring or using the practice or whatever, you introduce that in your day-to-day. I'm going to add the new feature and we're going to do pair programming. We're going to add the new feature and we're going to do TDD. We're going to You know what I mean? Again, that's part of the deal. Yeah. So the general heuristics are simple. Yeah. Identify the opportunity, clarify them, add value, prioritize, and then execute on them effectively. Yeah. Questions so far? Nothing? I'm explaining super well and nobody. Okay. Okay. So now I know what the issues are. I know what the value is. How do I connect that to the content that I need to teach? No? And here again, we already looked at the content before. Yeah, so stuff that you can cover. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Again, these are, there are books written on a lot of this stuff, etc. So it would be, it's not the point of what we're looking at today. Yeah. But you can already see that some of this stuff fits into some of the categories that I gave before. No? Remember communication, code, etc. Right? Organizational structure, organizational culture, etc. So some of these things you can already match. No, like if you know that this is the kind of smell that I have, then maybe I could work on this area, right? If I do my value stream mapping, then and I see that where the time is going, I can already see, maybe it's a method thing. Maybe it's the time that we spend on testing. Maybe it's maybe it's the time that we spend on the definition of the features. Maybe it is that the features are not very well defined. So you start pinpointing where the issues are in your value stream. Yeah. And that already, together with the classification that I gave you before, already tells you, where some of the activities or actions could be. Yeah. And I think it's pretty evident, but if not, we can do an example. Would you like to do an example?
Yeah. Let's go.
All right. So pick something, let's say an issue, that you normally see. Bugs in production, let's say something got to production and the whole system went down. Yeah. So you start looking at that and you map your process, and we have all these requirements, we implemented, we created tests, we automated. We automated most of the stuff until we got to a pre-production. Yeah. And then production is a completely different environment, handled by a different team, with a different configuration, different tools, because on staging we use whatever, and then in production we use whatever else. Yeah. Someone says issue build time 20+ minutes. Big monolith. No? Yeah, that we could do that example later. Yeah. So there you're already starting to see some of the potential root causes, right? You also have, what was it that happened? No, well, you do a root cause analysis of the thing. It's failing because X. No, and you're already seeing things like, okay, how long did it take us to fix this? No, or to get the system to the state that it was before, even before we introduced the change. Yeah. So all of those things are already pinpointing to stuff that you could do. Why was it hard to roll back? Or, did we have a copy? Did we have to do the whole process again? Did we have to, no? And it starts telling you the different areas where you can get the most impact. And then let's say, oh, you want to be able to roll back or whatever, but every time that we do this, instead of, I don't know, bringing up a new container or a new virtual machine with the stuff that, that went through testing, it turns out that the way that the operations team updates the system is someone logs in through SSH and does a Git pull on the server, right?
You can use Git, no, for...
Exactly. No, there are many ways of doing it.
Go to all branch and commit.
And then rolling back is you check out the same tag, no, or whatever, right? Like this is the thing. Like you can start pinpointing what are the things that that are having issues, and then you can link those to the content that you need, right? If it's containerization, cloud, automation, testing, definition of the stories, verification of the stories, whatever it is, whatever practices, let's say that a different, build time 20 minutes. Yeah. This is more of a technical thing. But, why does it take 20 minutes to build? No, that's a good question.
Time, no? It's a lot of time.
Well, there are systems that take longer. Yeah, but let's say that build time runs a lot of tests, etc. But every test is like end-to-end test. It has to, like, it takes a very long time basically to run the system, because the compilation time is really not that much, right? Like it's not such a big, but testing it might be a big problem, right? Like, because every test that we have is an end-to-end test. It requires you to create a new database, whatever. This is just an example. I don't know the context for the example that that Herman was saying, but that could be an example, of where you start seeing the inefficiencies. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
And together with the metrics and all of this stuff, you can see the impact. This is the other thing. Remember, it's ROI is about quantifying as well what you're getting, right? So if you're using any of the 4 key metrics, lead time, change failure rate, etc., and you fix these things, let's say you reduce the build time, to a couple of minutes or whatever, right? You should see an improvement in the lead time as well, right? You should see an improvement in the number of defects that you're getting. You should see an improvement in the time that it takes you to recover from defects. Like, this is why the metrics and the baseline are so important as well, because they will help you quantify the return on investment for this. Yeah. Also, maybe have that QA, beta, and live environment to build and test on. Yeah, exactly. Like, again, you do your value stream mapping. That's a good tool to use. Yeah, and then out of that, you start looking at each of the categories for potential, blockers for your ROI or generators of ROI if you want to take more of a positive spin. And then you link the content to those things in particular, and you need to break them down. I already talked, again, I'm not going into breaking it down because we discussed this in another session. Yeah, but again, there is a lot of stuff that you can do. That wasn't one example, of things that you can identify, and from there, start putting practices in place. Okay. Any other questions so far before I move on? All right. Now, when you map it, yeah, you need to, it's good to look at Bloom's taxonomy, as I mentioned in I think it was the previous session. Yeah, because you want to be able to break it down in a way in which the team can use it properly. Yeah, so you can't expect to do, let's say, let's use the same example that I was saying, where maybe you need containerization, or you need some of this stuff, right? You can't expect suddenly for the team to become experts at containerization.
It's
and
the Shohari, no? For example,
more or less, yeah. The idea is not only that is incremental, but you need to break it into small steps, right? So maybe you will start by using containers locally for your local testing environment, or for you to be, for the developer to be able to run things on its own, and then you may move that into your pipeline, and then you move that into your staging environment. And you know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean by breaking it into smaller steps that you can get
evolve.
Exactly, right? You don't go straight into, let's change production into containers and Kubernetes or whatever, because you haven't built the capability or the ability for it. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's super important, yeah, which is part of the execution. And here, there's two aspects that are fundamental for this. One is, have you heard of tiny habits or atomic habits before? It's great. Read the books. This is based on the research of B.J. Fogg. It's a guy from Stanford, I think, been studying behavior creation for a very long time. And he's developed a method that is very helpful for you to think about the stuff when you're applying it with the team. Yeah. And the method basically talks about what needs to happen in order for a habit to be created, or in order for an action to be performed. Yeah. And if you look at this graph here, you have motivation on one axis, you have ability on the other. Yeah. And then you have the action itself, let's say. No. Now this curve here is a curve that defines whether the action happens or not. Yeah. So the more ability you require for this, yeah, how much motivation do you need? Right? This is like going to the gym and press, doing bench press of 80 kilos, right? Or 40 kilos, whatever, some amount that is not, versus getting a weight that is just 5 kilos, right? Like you can probably do the 5 kilo ones, not so much the bench. You don't have all the ability, and the motivation that you need in order to continue the habit is a lot lower, right? Now there's another aspect to this, which is the trigger. Like what needs to happen for the action to happen? You need to have the motivation, you need to have the ability, enough ability, but then you also need a prompt, what he calls a prompt or a trigger, something that tells you to
Can I add something?
do the action. Yeah, go ahead.
I think part of motivation, you need compromise, because if I'm very motivated, but I only go to the gym once a week,
This is part of what this is part of what I'm exactly. This is part of what I'm getting at.
For do every day.
So part of the thing is, in order to create the habit, you don't start at the part where you need the most ability. You break down the habit into very, 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 very what he called tiny habits, that require very little motivation for you to do. Yeah, and then you can start piling on top of that. And I was talking to someone in Mallorca the other day. We did a community event there, and someone was saying, well, we tried pair programming, and we had, our company lets us do whatever we want, etc. But we ended up not doing it. Like I don't know why it didn't stick. We all thought that it was a good idea, but it didn't stick. Yeah. And so I asked him, okay, why is that? Like, what's the why do you think it is? And well, we were picking one story, yeah, and then we would all work on that story, and whoever was working on that story would be pairing with someone else. Okay, what about did you try doing it daily instead of everyone just 10 minutes, 15 minutes after the daily? Yeah, so right after the daily, we all put in place, we work in pairs for 15 minutes, and then we do whatever we want. If we want to continue pairing, we continue pairing. If we don't want to continue pairing, we do something else, no? But 15 minutes, you can do 15 minutes, right? Like it's not a big thing, right? You also can do it daily. That's another technique, but you also do it daily, right? Because you hook it to a habit that already exists, which is we're going to get together at 9 a.m. to discuss this thing. And right after this, we will sit down and we will So you're creating this tiny habit of getting together and pairing. And, once you get that going, when it's not a weird thing to do, then you extend, or why don't we try something else? Now, changing navigator and driver. Why don't we like you start increasing, let's say, the difficulty of the thing that you're doing in order to build that. Yeah.
experiments.
Yeah, you can also phrase it as an experiment, but the idea here is break it down to a very tiny thing that you can start doing with very low motivation. Yeah, and then you build up from there and hook it to a habit that you already have in place.
Thanks.
And there's another aspect to this, which is you do it daily, yeah, instead of doing 1 hour everyone on Friday. Yeah, because what you're working on is the habit, not the duration of the thing, right? It's like, oh, I'm gonna go to a gym, I'm gonna go once a month and I'm gonna stay the whole day at the gym. No, that's not how you build the muscle. That's not how you build the habit. That's not how you get healthy, right? You get healthy by doing it regularly, by, maybe not so much on the quantity. Yeah, so it's the same for this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Miguel mentions that you can learn and change things with only
In
15 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, because again, you're getting people, you're working against a lot of the frictions that we talked about before, like the fear and the resistance and all of that stuff, because what is preventing you from doing it for 15 minutes? Right? Nothing. There's no excuse. It's not like, no. What is preventing you from, starting with a class that, it's easy to refactor? Do that class and then you continue doing whatever, and then tomorrow you pick another class and refactor a little bit of that class, and then tomorrow, And then another thing that is important in this is modify your environment in order to make it easy for you, right? And here I'm talking about, we're talking about pair programming. Someone was saying something about pair programming. I think I was talking to Jose Luis this morning or something like that. Yeah. And again, if you're doing pair programming remotely, but you don't have any tooling, your ID is not set up, etc., those 10 minutes that you're focusing on in the morning after the daily, that's not going to happen, right? Like, you're going to spend 15 to 30 minutes just setting up your environment in order to start, right? So there's a lot of pre-work that you can do to make it easy, so the habit becomes easier. Yeah. Things like, pre-setting, setting up your environment, pre-selecting what code you're going to be refactoring. Now you're looking throughout the go, oh, look, this class seems easy to refactor. Okay, I'm gonna make a note. Yeah. This class here, this refactor, whatever, right? You make a note, and then the next day when you're doing your 15 minutes of refactor, yeah, you don't go around searching for what you're going to refactor. You go to the thing that you wrote down, you apply the refactor, and then that's it, right? Next thing, no? And the same with things like, cheat sheets or books or whatever. Like, you're reading on DDD or whatever, just keep your book on DDD close to your table. Why not there? You may not read it, but maybe you will, while that 20-minute build is going on. No, you have 20 minutes to look at the book, at least. You know what I mean? So you kind of modify your environment in order to make it easier for you to execute on those things. And again, because the investment is so small and you're creating the habit and then you can work from that, then it's a lot easier for the business as well to say, hey, yeah, it works. It's a lot easier for the team to say, hey, yes, let's do this, and so on, right? Again, maintaining that balance between those two. Yeah. And of course there's the reinforce the learning, no? Like, if that is happening, how do you and this goes back to, this is from another session, yeah, the ADKAR model, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. Yeah. So before we talked about awareness with metrics, with desire related to the change, really, knowledge is related to delivering the content, either class, workshop, blah, blah. Ability is actually doing it. So now we're talking about getting people to do it and, kind of making it worth for the business and all of this stuff. And then reinforcement, like, how do you make it so that people like it? No, or do more of that behavior. Yeah. And my preference on this is celebrate. Find a way to celebrate that the behavior has been expressed. Yeah, instead of punishing the behavior that you don't want to see, no, look for a way of rewarding the behavior that you want to see, and eventually the other behavior will get extinct, right? Like you won't see it because there's no reward for it. It's very Pavlovian, everything that I'm saying right now, but that's the idea, right? And again, it's you know, there's a few ways. I think in one talk, like I used to be in a team where every time that the build broke, like it went red, people would put 20 cents in a jar, yeah, and then at the end of the week they would take that money and go for beers. Yeah. So again, it's a way to kind of, okay, so let's try to reinforce the good behavior, but at the same time don't make it into a punishment, no, or whatever, right? Like if you do that, you know, do something else, right? Like it doesn't have to be that, right? But the idea is to reinforce the learning and the behavior that you want to see. Okay, so this is more or less everything that I have for today. We covered ROI, we covered, you know, how to identify what that is, no, how to quantify it a little bit, and how to connect or find where that is or the impact is in your system, team, etc. How to link that to the content that you are going to be doing, and then how to execute that in a way in which is palatable, no, like you can do things without having to make a lot of effort, etc. And again, some of these things will work better on one team, better on another. It depends also on how much the organization wants to invest on these things, but it's definitely better than just going without any kind of focus, no, or any kind of idea on how to approach it. Yeah, and I think that is it for today's session.